The silence of deep space was not empty, it was heavy. It pressed against the thick metal skin of the UES Ares, a Titan-class warship that was large enough to be mistaken for a small moon. The ship moved through the darkness like a giant shark in an endless ocean. It was gray, sharp, and terrifyingly powerful. This was the pride of the human fleet. It had enough guns to turn a city into dust in seconds. Inside the ship, the bridge was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. The air smelled like recycled oxygen and coffee. Many screens glowed with soft blue and green light, casting long shadows on the faces of the crew. Captain David Park stood in the center of the room. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that rarely showed emotion. He had spent 30 years in the United Earth Space Command. His hair was turning gray at the temples, and his eyes were tired, but they were sharp. He watched the main view screen, which showed only stars and the black void. "Report," David said. His voice was low and calm. Lieutenant Suk Kim sat at the tactical station. She was young but very smart. Her fingers danced quickly over her keyboard. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear and looked up. "Everything is normal, Captain," Suk said. "Long-range sensors are clear. The engine is running at 80% power. We are on course for the outer rim." David nodded slightly. He crossed his arms over his chest. He did not like normal. In his experience, normal meant that something bad was about to happen. The galaxy was a dangerous place. Humanity had fought hard to leave Earth and build these ships. They had fought against other species, pirates, and the harsh environment of space. They survived because they were always ready. "Keep scanning," David ordered. "I want to know if a rock floats out there before it hits us." "Yes, sir," Suk replied. The crew went back to work. They were professionals. They were the best of the best. But there was a feeling of boredom. They had been patrolling the sector for 3 months without seeing a single enemy. Some of the younger crew members played games on their screens when the officers were not looking. Others whispered to each other about what they would eat for dinner. Suddenly, the mood changed. A red light began to flash on Suk's console. It made a sharp beeping sound that cut through the low hum of the ship. Suk frowned. She tapped a few keys. The beeping got faster. "Captain," Suk said, her voice sounding tighter. "I have an anomaly." David turned around. He walked to her station. "What kind of anomaly?" "I do not know," Suk said. "It just appeared. It is not a ship. It is not a natural formation. The sensors say it is, a structure." "Put it on the main screen," David commanded. The large view screen at the front of the bridge flickered. The stars disappeared and were replaced by an image. The crew gasped. Floating in the emptiness was a massive ring. It was made of a material that looked like black glass. It was huge, maybe 10 miles wide. There were strange symbols carved into its surface that glowed with a faint purple light. It looked beautiful, but it also felt wrong. It did not look like something humans could build. "What is that?" asked Sergeant James Lee. James was the head of security on the bridge. He stood near the door, wearing his heavy black armor. He held his helmet under one arm. He was a big man with a scar on his chin. "It is alien," David said. He stared at the screen with intense focus. "Suk, are there any life signs?" "Scanning," Suk said. Her hands were shaking a little. "The energy readings are off the charts." "Wait. I am detecting a signal. It is coming from the ring." "Is it a weapon?" James asked. He stepped forward, his hand going to the gun on his belt. "Should we raise the shields?" "Shields up," David said immediately. "Red alert. All crew to battle stations." An alarm began to wail throughout the ship. The lights on the bridge turned red. The crew stopped their games and whispering. They jumped to their posts. The calm boredom was gone, replaced by sharp adrenaline. "Sir," Sook said. "The signal is not an attack. It is a request. A digital request to dock." David raised an eyebrow. "They want to dock with us. That thing is bigger than our ship." "Something is coming out of the ring, Captain," Sook said. "It is small." On the screen, a tiny dot detached itself from the massive alien ring. It moved toward the UES Ares. It was a shuttle, but it looked strange. It was round and smooth, with no sharp edges and no visible engines. It moved silently and effortlessly. "Lock weapons on that target," David said. "If they make one wrong move, we blast them." "Weapons locked," James confirmed. David watched the small ship approach. He had to make a decision. He could blow it out of the sky. It was the safe thing to do. But if he did that, they might never learn who these aliens were. Humanity needed information. They needed to know what was out here. The alien ship stopped right in front of the Ares. It was tiny compared to the massive human warship. It looked like a fly sitting next to a tank. "Sook," David said. "Open a channel. Let's hear what they have to say." A moment later, a voice filled the bridge. It was not like a human voice. It sounded like wind blowing through a tunnel. It sent a shiver down James's spine. "We are the observers," the voice said. "We come in peace. We wish to speak to your leader." David looked at James. James looked back and shook his head slightly. He did not trust it. "Peace," David said quietly. "Everyone says they come in peace until they shoot you." "Sir, the alien ship is requesting permission to land in Hangar Bay 4, Sook said. David stood silent for a long moment. He looked at the massive Titan-class warship he commanded. They had enough firepower to destroy a small planet. He felt confident. He felt safe. "Let them in," David said finally. "But I want a full Marine squad in the hangar bay. Heavy weapons. No chances." "Yes, sir," James said. "I will lead them myself." James put on his helmet and marched out of the bridge. His boots clanged loudly on the metal floor. He was ready for a fight. He hoped it would be a fight. He was bored of drills. "Sook," David said. "Keep the main railguns charged. If they try anything, you fire that ring into dust." "Yes, Captain," Sook said. David straightened his uniform. He walked toward the elevator. "I am going to the hangar bay. You have the bridge, Sook." "Be careful, Captain," Sook said. David nodded. The elevator doors closed, and he began his descent. He thought about his wife and daughter back on Earth. He thought about all the training he had done. He did not know what was waiting for him in the hangar, but he knew one thing: humans did not give up easily. Whatever came out of that ship, David would face it head on. The ship felt different now. The red alert lights made the corridors look eerie. Crew members ran to their posts, carrying equipment and weapons. The silence was gone. The UES Ares was waking up. When the elevator doors opened at the hangar level, the air was colder. The smell of oil and hydraulic fluid was strong. The huge blast doors of Hangar Bay 4 were shut. In front of them stood 20 Marines. They were dressed in black and green armor, holding large rifles. They formed a semicircle. They looked like a wall of steel. James stood in the middle. He turned his head as David walked up. "We are ready, Captain," James said through the speakers in his helmet. "The doors are opening now." With a loud groan of heavy metal, the blast doors began to slide apart. Beyond them, the blackness of space was visible, protected only by a thin energy force field. The small alien ship floated inside. It did not use landing gear. It simply hovered a few inches above the floor. It was silent. No engines roared. No steam hissed. It settled gently onto the metal deck. The Marines tightened their grip on their rifles. David stood in front of them, unarmed. He wanted to show he was not afraid, even though his heart was beating fast. A door opened on the side of the alien craft. It slid down like a ramp. David held his breath. This was it. First contact. A figure appeared at the top of the ramp. It was not what David expected. It was not green. It did not have big eyes. It was covered in a dark cloak that seemed to absorb the light. The figure stepped down. It walked slowly. As it entered the full light of the hangar bay, David saw that it was hard to look at. The figure was like a shadow given form. It was there, but it was not fully there. David stepped forward. He put his hands behind his back. "I am Captain David Park of the UES Ares. You have entered human territory. State your purpose." The figure stopped. It did not have a face that David could see, but he felt like it was staring into his soul. A strange pressure filled the room. It felt like the air was getting heavier. The shadow spoke. The voice did not come from a mouth. It echoed inside David's head. "I am the Herald," the voice said. "I have come to judge you." David frowned. "Judge us on what grounds?" "Violence," the Herald said. "You are a species of war. We have watched you. We have seen what you do to each other, and what you did to the Xylans. You are a plague." "We survived," David said firmly. "That is not a crime." The Herald glided closer to David. The Marines flinched but held their ground. The creature ignored the guns. It acted as if they were toys. "Survival is for those who earn it," the Herald said. "You rely on your metal shells. You rely on your loud explosions. You think this ship makes you strong." "It does," David said. The Herald made a sound that was like a dry laugh. "No. It makes you weak. It makes you dependent. I am here to show you the truth. I am here to show you what real power looks like." David felt a sudden chill. His instincts, which had saved him in a dozen battles, were screaming at him. Something was very wrong. This alien was not here to talk. It was here to make a point. "James," David said softly. "Get ready." But before James could give the order, the Herald raised a hand. The hand was long and thin, made of shifting darkness. "Look at your weapons," the Herald said. "Look at your ship." David looked around. The lights in the hangar bay flickered. The Marines' rifles began to hum, but not in a good way. The sound died in their throats. Suddenly, the UES Ares shook. It was not an explosion. It was a deep shudder that ran through the entire ship, from the engine room to the bridge. "Sook," David said into his communicator, but there was only static. "Your machines are sleeping," the Herald said. "And now, so are you." The shadow took one more step forward, crossing the invisible line that separated the ship from the intruder. As its foot touched the ground, a wave of invisible energy washed out from it. The massive warship, the titan of the fleet, the iron giant of the stars, froze. The feeling that washed over the hangar bay was not like anything Captain David Park had ever felt. It was not the jerk of deceleration or the shudder of an impact. It was a sudden, heavy silence. It felt like the air had turned into thick syrup. The hum of the ventilation fan stopped. The low, constant vibration of the massive engine deep in the ship's belly vanished. David tried to take a step forward, but his legs felt like they were made of lead. He looked down at his boots. They were planted firmly on the metal floor, but it felt like the floor had become a magnet. He looked up at the Marines. Sergeant James Lee stood just a few feet away. James was a huge man, encased in powered armor that weighed hundreds of pounds. Usually, the armor made a soft whirring sound as the servos helped him move. Now, the armor was silent. James was frozen in a crouching position, his rifle raised. His finger was on the trigger, but he could not pull it. What is happening? David thought. He tried to shout, to order an attack, but his tongue felt heavy in his mouth. The words died in his throat. The herald, the creature of shadow, did not seem to be affected. It glided smoothly across the floor, moving closer to the line of frozen soldiers. It passed by a Marine named Private Miller. Miller's eyes were wide with terror behind his visor. He was screaming, David could see, but no sound came out. The silence was absolute. The herald stopped in the center of the semicircle of soldiers. It turned its dark, featureless face toward Captain David. You see, the herald's voice echoed inside David's head. It was clearer now, sharp and cold. You rely on your technology. You rely on your noise and your speed. When I take those away, you are nothing but statues. David strained with every ounce of his strength. He clenched his fists. He focused all his will on moving his right arm. He wanted to grab the sidearm at his hip. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His muscles trembled under the pressure. Slowly, painfully, his hand moved an inch. It was a massive effort, like lifting a car. The herald noticed the movement. It turned its head slightly. Ah, the voice said. The biological will. It is annoying, like a fly buzzing against a window. But it is useless. The herald raised one of its long, dark arms. It pointed a finger at David. Sleep, the voice commanded. A wave of dizziness hit David. His vision blurred. The inch he had moved was lost as his arm fell back to his side. His knees buckled, but he did not fall. He remained standing, locked in place by the invisible force. He was still conscious, but his body was no longer his to control. He was a prisoner inside his own mind. High above them, on the bridge, the situation was just as terrifying. Lieutenant Suk Kim stared at her screens in horror. The main view screen still showed the stars, but they looked wrong. They were not twinkling. They were frozen points of light. The main reactor is offline, Suk said. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. She was typing on her keyboard, but nothing was happening. I am trying to restart the grid, but the computer is not responding. It is dead. Ensign Taylor, sitting at the navigation station, was panic-stricken. I cannot move the ship, Lieutenant. The helm is locked. The thrusters are not firing. We are drifting. Suk looked at the red alert lights. They were frozen on, not blinking. The siren had stopped in mid-wail. It was as if time itself had stopped for the machines, but not for the people. Is it an EMP? Ensign Taylor asked. Did they pulse us? No, Suk said, her mind racing. She was a science officer as well as tactical. She knew physics. An EMP would fry the circuits. The circuits are fine. They just stopped. The energy is there, but it cannot flow. It is being held back. She looked out the viewport at the alien ring in the distance. It was glowing brighter now. The purple light was pulsing. They are doing this, Suk whispered. The creature on the ship. It is projecting a field. What do we do? Taylor asked, looking at Suk like a child looking for a parent. Suk took a deep breath. Fear wanted to take over, but she pushed it down. She was an officer of the UES Ares. She had a duty. We try to communicate, Suk said. We try to warn the captain. She reached for the hardline phone on the console, a backup system that did not rely on the main computer. She lifted the receiver. It was dead. No dial tone. Nothing. Communications are down, she said. We are blind and deaf. Back in the hangar bay, the Herald was pacing. It moved slowly, inspecting the human soldiers like they were items in a shop. It stopped in front of Sergeant James Lee. James was the strongest of them all, a veteran of many ground wars. Even though he could not move, his eyes burned with pure anger. He stared at the alien, hate radiating from him. Fascinating, the Herald said, projecting its thoughts so everyone could hear. You are not afraid of death. You are angry because you cannot fight. The alien reached out a dark hand and touched the chest plate of James's armor. The metal did not react. Your armor is a cage, the Herald said. It limits you. You think it makes you a god, but it makes you dependent. Without it, you are soft. Without your guns, you are helpless. James tried to spit at the alien, but he could not even move his jaw. The Herald turned away from James and looked at the ceiling, as if it could see through the metal layers of the ship all the way to the bridge. Leaders of humanity, the Herald's voice boomed, not just in the hangar, but in the minds of everyone on the ship. I am the Herald of the hegemony. We have watched your species for a long time. You spread like a virus. You colonize. You build weapons. You destroy. The alien paused, letting the silence stretch. We are the custodians of peace, the Herald continued. We silence the chaos. We freeze the disorder. You are too dangerous to exist freely. Your technology is primitive, but your aggression is high. Therefore, you must be culled. Captain David's heart pounded against his ribs. Culled. It was a word used for animals. It meant extermination. This was not a diplomatic mission. It was an execution. You will not destroy us, David thought, screaming the words in his mind. You will not. The Herald laughed, a dry, scratching sound in David's head. I do not need to destroy you. I have already stopped you. Your great warship is a tomb. I have shut down your physics within this radius. You are frozen in time. My fleet is already on its way. They will finish what I have started. They will harvest your resources and scrub your planet clean of your kind. The alien glided back toward the ramp of its ship. I will leave you here to contemplate your failure, the Herald said. You will float in this void, frozen and conscious, until the end comes. It is a mercy. The alien began to ascend the ramp. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, savoring its victory. In the bridge, Suk Kim slammed her fist against the console. It hurt, but the physical pain helped her focus. "Taylor," she said sharply. "Get up. Go to the engineering locker. Get the manual tools." Taylor looked at her, confused. "Tools? What good will a wrench do?" "The alien field stops energy," Suk said, thinking fast. "It stops electricity and kinetics. But maybe it can't stop simple mechanics. Maybe it can't stop gravity." She stood up. "We are not dead yet. The captain is down there. We have to do something." "But what?" Taylor cried. "We override the airlocks," Suk said. "We vent the atmosphere. We create a draft. You want to suck us out into space?" "No," Suk said. "I want to change the pressure. Maybe if we disrupt the environment, we disrupt the field. It is a long shot, but it is the only one we have." In the hangar, the Herald was almost at the top of the ramp. It turned back one last time. "Farewell, Titans of Earth," the voice mocked. "May your stillness be peaceful." David watched the alien leave. Despair began to creep into his mind. The alien was right. They were frozen. The guns didn't work. The suits didn't work. They were helpless. But then, he looked at James Lee. James was still angry. He wasn't giving up. And then David looked at his own hand. He had moved it an inch. Just an inch. But it had moved. The field was strong, but it wasn't infinite. The alien had said it stopped kinetics. It stopped things that moved fast or used energy. But what about things that moved slow? What about pure, raw muscle? David thought about the history of humanity. They didn't start with spaceships. They started with sticks and stones. They survived ice ages and predators with no claws. They survived because they refused to die. "I am not done," David thought. The Herald reached the door of its ship. It paused. It sensed something. A slight fluctuation in the biological frequency of the humans. It looked down at David. "Why do you resist?" the Herald asked, sounding almost curious. "It is illogical. You cannot win. Accept your fate." David closed his eyes for a second. He blocked out the fear. He blocked out the impossible physics. He focused on one thing: the alien was right there. It was close. If he could just reach it. He remembered a lesson from his training instructor years ago. "The machine is just a tool," the old man had said. "The weapon is the man. If the gun breaks, use your knife. If the knife breaks, use your hands. If you have no hands, use your teeth. Never stop fighting." David opened his eyes. They were clear and hard. "Humanity," David whispered, using all his strength to force air through his frozen vocal cords, "does not freeze." The words were quiet, a raspy gasp. But the alien heard them. The Herald stopped. It turned fully around on the ramp. "What did you say?" the voice asked, no longer mocking, but annoyed. David didn't answer with words. He answered with action. He stopped trying to move his whole body. He focused on just one muscle. He focused on the locking mechanism of his heavy magnetic boots. The boots were sealed to help him walk in zero gravity. They had a manual latch. Click. It was a tiny sound, but in the dead silent hangar, it sounded like a gunshot. David had unlocked his boots. The Herald took a step down, concerned now. "Stop." David took a deep breath. He ignored the crushing weight of the field pressing down on him. He lifted his leg. It was agonizing. It felt like lifting a mountain. His muscles screamed. Veins bulged in his neck. He moved his foot forward. 6 inches. Then the other foot. He began to walk. It was slow, clumsy, and painful. He looked like a sleepwalker, or a zombie. But he was moving. The Marines watched him. They saw their captain walking. They felt the hope spark in their chests. If he could move, maybe they could too. James Lee growled, a low, guttural sound deep in his throat. He started to fight the freeze. The Herald watched David approach. It raised its hand again, sending a stronger pulse of suppression. "You are stubborn," the Herald said. "But you are still just a man." David took another step. He was 10 feet away now. He was panting, sweat dripping from his nose. "I am a man," David thought. "And that is why you will lose." The alien ship sat behind the Herald, ramp open. The escape route for the alien. David wasn't trying to run. He wasn't trying to use a weapon. He was walking right at the entity that had paralyzed a Titan-class warship. The hangar bay was silent again, except for the heavy, dragging footsteps of Captain David Park. Thud. Drag. Thud. Drag. He was coming for the Herald. The sound of Captain David Park's boots dragging across the metal floor was the only noise in the vast, silent chamber. It was a harsh, grinding sound. Scrape. Thud. Scrape. Thud. Every step was a battle. David's muscles burned as if he were lifting a heavy weight with every movement. The invisible field that the alien had created pushed down on him, trying to crush him into the floor. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes, but he could not wipe it away. The Herald stood at the top of the ramp, its shadowy body flickering with annoyance. It tilted its head, watching the human struggle to move. "You are foolish," the Herald's voice echoed in the minds of everyone present. The mental voice was no longer calm. It held a trace of confusion. "Your technology is dead. Your machines are statues. Why do you fight the inevitable? You are biological. You are soft. You should be paralyzed by your own fear." David did not answer. He did not have the breath to speak. He just locked his eyes on the alien. He took another step. Then another. He was closing the distance. Sergeant James Lee, frozen in his power armor, watched his captain. James was a strong man, but he could not move his limbs. The servos in his suit were locked tight. But seeing David move, seeing the sheer refusal to give up, sparked a fire in James's mind. "Move," James thought. "Move." He strained against the metal shell. He pushed with his mind and his muscles. A red light on his wrist display flickered. The alien field was suppressing energy, but James's rage was a form of energy too. It was wild and uncontrolled. Slowly, the gauntlet of his armor creaked. The metal groaned under the pressure. He managed to curl his fingers slightly. It was just a small movement, but it was a crack in the alien's wall. The Herald seemed to sense the shift. It turned its attention away from David for a split second and looked at the squad of Marines. "Stay still," the Herald commanded. The mental voice was like a hammer blow to their skulls. The pressure in the room increased. David fell to one knee. The weight was too much. His legs shook violently. He felt like he was going to pass out. The darkness at the edge of his vision tried to pull him down. No, David thought. He gritted his teeth so hard he thought they might crack. Not yet. He looked up at the alien. The Herald was now distracted, trying to keep the Marines frozen. David realized something important. The alien had to divide its attention. It could not hold the entire ship and focus all its power on him at the same time. The alien was powerful, but its mind was not infinite. David summoned every last bit of strength he had left. He roared, a low, animalistic sound that tore from his throat. He forced himself to stand up. He ignored the pain in his joints. He ignored the screaming of his muscles. He took the final step. He was right at the bottom of the ramp. The Herald looked down at him. You have arrived. Now what? You have no weapon. You have no power. You are just a tired old man. David looked the alien in the face, or where the face should be. He saw nothing but swirling darkness. I have me, David said. His voice was weak, but the words were clear. He lunged. It was not a graceful attack. It was a desperate, clumsy tackle. David threw his body forward, aiming for the center of the shadowy mass. The Herald did not move back. It did not expect a physical attack. It expected ships and lasers. It did not know how to handle a 200-pound man launching himself like a missile. David collided with the alien. The impact was shocking. David expected to hit solid matter, or to pass through smoke. Instead, it felt like hitting a wall of cold jelly. The shadowy substance wrapped around him. It felt icy and slick, like oil. The alien shrieked. The sound was not a vocal sound, it was a psychic scream that shattered the concentration in the room. Get off me! The Herald's voice yelled in their heads. It was no longer arrogant. It was panicked. You are filthy. You are chaotic. David wrapped his arms around the alien, trying to pull it down to the ground. He had no plan. He just knew he had to break the creature's focus. If he could disrupt it, even for a second, the ship might come back online. The alien struggled. It was strong. It felt like David was wrestling a storm. The darkness lashed out, striking David's chest. It felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. But David held on. He dug his boots into the metal ramp. He pulled with everything he had. James! David screamed in his mind, hoping the sergeant could hear him. Shoot it! Shoot it now! James Lee saw the captain grappling with the entity. He saw the alien thrashing, its form flickering wildly. The psychic field that held the ship in place was fluctuating. The lights on the bridge flickered. The gun in James's hand was still dead. The electronic trigger would not work. But James was a veteran. He knew the old ways. He reached for the mechanical charging handle on the side of his heavy rifle. Clack clack. He pulled it back. It was stiff, fighting the pressure, but it moved. He chambered around manually. Captain, down! James roared. The sound actually came out of his mouth this time, a ragged shout. David heard him. He knew what he had to do. He released his grip on the alien and threw himself backward, rolling down the ramp and onto the floor of the hangar. The Herald stumbled forward, surprised by the sudden release of pressure. It loomed over David, raising a hand to strike a fatal blow. Bang! Bang! Bang crack! The sound was deafening in the silent hangar. James Lee had fired 3 rounds. They were not standard bullets. They were tungsten penetrators, designed to punch through tank armor. The bullets tore through the shadowy form of the Herald. The alien shrieked again, a sound of pure agony. The physical projectiles disrupted the energy field that held its body together. Glowing blue liquid sprayed out from the wounds. The shadow flickered and distorted, becoming unstable. The mental scream stopped abruptly. The pressure in the air vanished. Instantly, the hum of the ventilation fans returned. The lights in the hangar bay flared back to full brightness. The red alert lights began to spin again, and the siren wailed. On the bridge, Suk Kim's screens exploded with data. Power is back. Ensign Taylor shouted. The reactor is online. Suk didn't waste a second. She slammed her hand onto the firing console. Main batteries. Target that alien ring. Fire. High above the ship, the massive railguns of the UES Ares spun up. They released their power. 2 streaks of light shot out from the warship, crossing the distance to the alien ring in seconds. The ring, which was glowing with purple energy, shattered. The metal broke apart like glass. The shock wave pushed the small alien ship away from the Ares. In the hangar, the Herald was on its knees. It was leaking blue light everywhere. It looked weak. "You broke the stillness," the alien wheezed. The voice in their heads was faint, fading. "We did not know you were animals." David stood up slowly. He was bruised and battered, but he was free. He walked back up the ramp. He stood over the dying alien. "We are humans," David said. "And we don't stay frozen." He looked back at his squad. "Medic. Secure the area. James, nice shot." James lowered his smoking rifle. He tapped the side of his helmet. "Just doing my job, sir. Though I think I prefer shooting things that actually die when you hit them." The alien ship began to spark. The damage to the Herald was affecting the craft. It was losing power. Suk's voice came over the hangar speakers. "Captain, are you alive? We read massive life sign fluctuations down there." "I am here, Suk," David said, keying his communicator. "Good shooting on the ring." "That thing was trying to call a fleet." "Fleet?" Suk asked. "You mean there are more of them?" "That is what it said," David said, looking at the dissolving shadow of the Herald. "They came to judge us. They came to cull us." David looked at the Marines who were now shaking off the paralysis, checking their weapons and helping each other up. They looked tired, but their eyes were fierce. The fear was gone, replaced by adrenaline and anger. "Well," David said, his voice hardening. "They judged wrong." He looked down at the alien. The Herald was almost gone, its form turning into mist. "They thought we were weak because we use machines," David said to the room. "They thought if they took away our tech, we would be helpless. They don't understand us." James walked up the ramp, standing next to his captain. "What do we do now, sir?" David looked out the open blast doors at the stars. The alien ring was destroyed, but the threat was not over. The Herald had mentioned a fleet. The hegemony. "Now," David said, straightening his uniform. "We prepare. We send a message to Earth Command. We tell them that the peace is over. We tell them that the giants are awake." He turned to the squad. "Clean this mess up. I want that alien ship studied. If there are more coming, I want to know how to kill them." The Marines shouted, "Yes, sir," in unison. The sound was loud and chaotic, the complete opposite of the silence that had held them prisoner just moments ago. David walked off the ramp. His body ached, but his spirit was soaring. They had faced a power that could freeze time, and they had broken it with nothing but willpower and a bullet. It was the first victory, but David knew it would not be the last. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not just another species to be culled. They were the variable that no equation could predict. They were the noise in the silence. And they were very, very dangerous when provoked. The adrenaline that had fueled Captain David Park began to fade, leaving behind a deep, throbbing exhaustion. His muscles screamed in protest after the fight against the invisible weight. He stood in the middle of the hangar bay, watching his crew secure the area. The immediate danger was over, but the silence that followed was heavy, not with fear this time, but with the weight of what they had just learned. Sergeant James Lee walked over to him. The big sergeant had removed his helmet, revealing a face covered in sweat and a determined expression. He was holding a data pad, looking at the readings from the alien shuttle. "Captain," James said, his voice rough. "The alien ship is dead. No power left. But we found something in its computer core. It was sending a transmission." David wiped his face with a sleeve. "Was it calling for help?" "No, sir," James said, his eyes darkening. "It was a report. A status update. It told them that we were neutralized." David felt a cold pit form in his stomach. "But we weren't neutralized. We won. To the machine, we looked defeated," James explained. "The report says the UES Ares is disabled and the crew is incapacitated. It recommends that the cleansing fleet proceed to Earth immediately to secure the planet before we can recover." David looked up at the ceiling, imagining the vast emptiness of space between them and home. "How long until they get here?" James looked down at the pad. "The data suggests they use a faster-than-light drive that is much more advanced than ours. If they were waiting on the other side of that ring, they could be here in hours. Maybe less." "Hours," David whispered. He turned and looked at his Marines. They were checking their gear, reloading their weapons, and helping the wounded. They were good soldiers, but they were not ready for a whole fleet. The UES Ares was damaged, and they were alone in the dark. "Sook," David said, tapping his communicator. "Get me the engine room. I need to know if we can fly." Sook's voice came back instantly. "Captain, I am here. Chief Miller is working on the main drive. We took some damage to the power couplings when the field collapsed, but we can fix it. We can move, but not at full speed." "I don't need full speed," David said. "I need enough speed to get between Earth and that fleet." "Can we jump?" "We can make a short hyperspace jump," Sook said after a short pause. "Maybe 1 or 2 jumps before the core overheats." "That's it?" David thought quickly. He had to make a choice. He could run back to Earth to warn them, but that would leave the path open for the enemy to follow. He could stay and fight, but one ship against a fleet was suicide. Then, he looked at the alien shuttle again. He looked at the strange, sleek design. It was small, but it had crossed the galaxy to get here. "James," David said. "You said the alien ship is dead." "Yes, sir. Completely drained. The power cells are empty." "But the ship itself," David said, walking toward the ramp. "The hull. The design. Is it intact?" "Mostly," James said, confused. "Why?" "Because that ship isn't just a vehicle," David said, his mind racing. "It's a key. The Herald said it came through the ring. That ring was a gate. If we can understand how their ship works, maybe we can use their own gate against them." "You want to fly the alien ship?" James asked, raising an eyebrow. "Sir, none of us know how to pilot that thing." It doesn't even have a steering wheel. We don't need to fly it, David said. We need to reverse engineer its drive signature. If we can mimic their signal, maybe we can trick their fleet. Or maybe we can use their technology to boost our own sensors. He turned to the squad. I want that ship loaded onto the cargo elevator. Now. Get it to the engineering lab. Tell the science team I don't care how they do it, but I want that ship's computer opened by the time we reach Earth. The Marines moved fast. They grabbed heavy cables and hooks. Even though the alien ship was sleek, it was heavy. They grunted and strained, but within minutes, they had secured it. The cargo lift whined as it hoisted the captured prize up to the upper decks. David watched it go. He felt a glimmer of hope. It was a crazy plan, but humans were good at crazy plans. He started walking toward the bridge. James followed him. The corridors of the ship were buzzing with activity now. Crew members were running, repairing wires, and sealing bulkheads. The fear was gone, replaced by a frantic energy. They knew they were in a race against time. When they stepped onto the bridge, the atmosphere was tense. Lieutenant Suk Kim was at her station, typing furiously. The main screen showed a star map. A red dot was blinking near the location of the destroyed ring. Captain, Suk said, not looking up. We are picking up a signal. It is faint, but it is definitely there. It is a beacon. It started transmitting the moment we destroyed the ring. It's a homing beacon, David said. Yes, Suk confirmed. And it is getting stronger. Something is coming through. The fleet. They are entering our space. How many? David asked, walking to the center of the room. I can't get a clear count yet, Suk said. The interference is high. But, the energy readings are massive. Captain, there are more ships out there than we have in our entire navy. David stood still for a moment. He looked at the red dot on the screen. It was like a drop of blood in water. The enemy was coming. They thought the UES Ares was dead. They thought Earth was defenseless. They were wrong. Suk, David said. Prepare for hyperspace jump. Target a coordinate between here and the Sol system. We need to intercept them before they see Earth. Coordinates set, Suk said. But Captain, if we jump, we will be depleting our fuel reserves. We won't be able to jump back out if things go wrong. We won't need to jump back out, David said firmly. Because we are going to make a stand there. He turned to James. Sergeant, gather every Marine we have, and get the crew from the engineering labs. I need you to modify the warp drive. Modify it, Sir James asked. How? We are going to overload the emitters, David said. Not enough to blow us up, but enough to create a massive shockwave when we drop out of hyperspace. We are going to blind their sensors for a few seconds. James grinned. He understood now. A flashbang. But on a starship scale. Exactly, David said. We are the underdogs, James. We have to fight dirty. David sat in his command chair. It felt good to sit. His body was hurting, but his mind was clear. He looked around the bridge. He saw young faces, terrified but brave. He saw Suk, focused on her screens. He saw James, ready to carry out the impossible orders. Listen to me, David said, his voice booming over the ship's intercom so everyone could hear. We have fought a monster today. We froze, and then we unfroze. We proved that no matter what technology throws at us, the human spirit is stronger. Now, a fleet is coming. They think they are hunters. They think they are gods. He paused. We are going to show them that they have walked into a trap. We are not just going to defend Earth. We are going to take the fight to them. We are going to crash their party with everything we have. The crew cheered. It was not a loud cheer, but a determined one. Engineering, David said. Give me everything you have. Sook, take us out of here. The UES Ares turned in the void. Its engines glowed with a blue light that was brighter than usual. The ship trembled as it gathered power. On the screen, the star lines stretched. The ship jumped into hyperspace, leaving the destroyed ring behind. They were racing toward the enemy fleet. They were carrying a stolen alien ship and a plan that was madness. But David Park did not care. He knew that humanity was at its best when the odds were the worst. The journey would take hours. In those hours, the crew would work without sleep. Scientists would tear apart the alien shuttle, looking for secrets. Engineers would rig the engines to blow. Marines would sharpen their bayonets. David sat in his chair, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace. He thought about the Herald. The alien had called them chaotic. It had called them a plague. Maybe we are a plague, David whispered to himself. But we are a plague that you cannot cure. He closed his eyes for just a moment. He knew that when he opened them again, the battle would begin. The next time they dropped out of hyperspace, there would be no negotiation. There would be no silence. There would only be the sound of war. And humanity was ready to make some noise.